Hello everyone, welcome to a brand new video on the cervical plexus. So we're going to do some anatomical drawing today. What we're going to be talking about are the ventral rami, or the nerve roots that actually contribute to the cervical plexus. We'll look at the major nerves that are part of the cervical plexus, and then we'll look at the little branches, roots of those that are associated and branches of those nerves. So we're going to look at things like what nerve roots, C1, C2, C3, C4, contribute to each particular nerve of the plexus, and we'll look at branches that come off of there. So we're going to start off with cervical plexus, and to understand the cervical plexus, I first just want to talk about what is the ventral rami. So it is made up of ventral rami. We often call these ventral rami roots, because you probably are familiar with roots, trunks, divisions, cords, and peripheral nerves, or branches that come off the nerve plexuses. Well, the roots of each nerve plexus are actually the ventral rami. And the ventral rami here, the nerve roots are C1 through C4, but then there are actually contributions from C5. C1 to C4 with contributions from C5 nerve root. Now, I will actually get into these and show you what these are. Now, it innervates and controls things like your head. Sorry, I made that a little bit too big there. The head, the neck, the diaphragm, and also part of shoulders. So you're looking at a few things that this actually innervates or controls. Now, as we talk about the main nerves that produce the plexus itself, there's a way that I always, when I'm in class, I discuss the main nerves. I always kind of say, well, you want to go buy a new video game for the Xbox or PlayStation, and they say, well, what do you want to buy? And you tell the person at the store, GTA, please, sir, that you want to buy GTA, please, sir. And these, with G, that's going to be great auricular nerve. T, transverse cervical. And sometimes I cannot write on my iPad, transverse cervical. A is the ansa cervicalis. And then P is the phrenic. And then S is the supraclavicular nerves. Supraclavicular nerves. So supraclavicular, this makes up your main branches of cervical plexus. Now, to actually go and understand and learn cervical plexus now, what we're going to do is we're going to take time to draw out these main nerves. And to start off, we are going to draw some boxes representing the cervical vertebrae. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So even though there are 7 cervical vertebrae, we're only drawing the first 5. 3, 4, and 5. So let's number these as C1, C2, C3, C4, and C5 vertebrae. Now that we have our vertebrae numbered, I want to remind you guys that in the cervical spinal cord, nerve roots are numbered and named for the vertebrae they are above. So the C1 nerve root comes out between the skull and C1. C2 just above the C2 vertebrae. C3, of course, here. C4 here. and C5 here. And this is why there is a C8 nerve root. It is because of the C7 below C7 vertebrae is the C8, because T1 after thoracic, you're not named and numbered after the vertebrae you're below. So we have an odd man out. We call that C8. Now, since we have done this, what we are now going to do is on this side, on this side here, we're going to write sensory. We're going to discuss the sensory nerves. And on this side, we're going to discuss those with a motor component and discuss motor here. So let's actually begin on sensory. Now, at sensory, what we're going to do is we're going to start at C2 and connect C2 and C3 like so. Then we're going to do the same thing at C3 and C4 as well and connect these two together. Now, with this, I'm going to change some color here. I'm going to use a purplish color, and I'm going to come off of the root of C2 right here, and I'm going to go up and out a little bit here for a sensory nerve, the lesser occipital. Now, I am going to talk about what these nerves do a little bit. The lesser occipital. Now what we want to do is with the unification of C2 and C3, we want to draw a line out of here a little bit, and then what I'm going to do, let's use green up, and let's use, let's say, blue going down. And the green that's on the top, that's going to represent our great, sorry, that was supposed to have been changed to green. The green at the top is going to represent the great auricular. Great auricular nerve. Then, the one that I have in blue, this will be the transverse cervical nerve. Transverse cervical. Transverse cervical nerve. Then, what we're going to do, we can take another kind of lovely color. Let's pick kind of this tone here and come out this light blue and come out and represent our supraclavicular. Supraclavicular nerves. Now, as we're discussing these, what we want to pay attention to with the sensory, the lesser occipital. Notice that lesser occipital's branches are from the, it's actually coming off from the nerve root between, associated here with the lesser occipital with C2 nerves, the C2 nerve root. The nerve roots here are associated to the second and the third vertebrae is where it's getting its most of its innervation from, between the second and third vertebrae. It's controlling things like your lateral scalp, posterior parts of the ear, using your greater occipital. And so what we could see is, guys, as well, that it's all about C2 and C3 also giving some of the nerves there. Some of the nerve fibers are sneaking from there. The great auricular between sensory neuron here, sensory nerves with the great auricular, the spinal nerves of C2 and C3, we could see also help produce that. It's looking at skin around your cheeks that's just over your parotid gland. It's also looking at things like the mastoid process and parts of the outer ear surfaces. Transverse cervical that we've drawn, associated again to C2, C3, it actually wraps around the sternocleidomastoid muscle anatomically, so it makes it easy to find on anatomical models and in cadavers. And then our supraclavicular C3 and C4 nerve roots are helping to produce these. So the rest of them are all C2, C3. Now we're looking at C3, C4 here. And we're looking at over the clavicle, what we call the anterior-medial part of the shoulder and medial chest. And it does have 3 branches that come off of it. And these 3 branches, these are the medial, intermediate or intermedial, and lateral branches of that supraclavicular nerve. Now this is, of course, with the sensory aspects. What we're then going to want to turn our attention to is motor aspects, motor nerves. Now to do that, we're going to start at the C1, C2 nerve root, and we're going to link those together thusly. Then we're going to take and do the same thing to C2, C3, and link it together thusly. Now, a couple of things I want to do. Off of C2, let's also come down here and up here, and then do the same thing from C3 and C4. Except on C3 and C4, we're not going to link it, but we're going to put these branches here. Now, I'm going to use some space-saving abbreviations there. Now, what I want to do before I do anything is actually discuss a nerve that is not part of it, but passes in such close proximity, it can even give nerve fibers to portions of the motor aspects here, these nerves, coming down from the brain and in close proximity, and I'm going to draw it in red here, will be a cranial nerve number 12, the hypoglossal nerve. Now, with hypoglossal nerve done, one of the things I also want to do, let's pick a nice lightish blue here. I'm going to pick this nice bright blue. And where we have C1, C2 meets, and then where we had C2, C3 meet, we're going to draw a loop that comes around and down, loops, and comes up to here. And this is representing the ansa cervicalis. Ansa cervicalis, or ansa cervical, it gets its name from the handle of a teacup. Now, the ansa cervicalis actually has 2 separate and distinctive branches that come off of it, which the one that actually is here in close proximity to cranial nerve number 12, this one here is called the descendens hypoglossi. Descendens hypoglossi. And it's very hard to write that fine here. Now, the other branch that is also found here is the descendens cervicalis. The descendens cervicalis, forming this loop, this kind of teacup handle. Now, as I said, I'm going to be using a few little bits of some space-saving things, but right up here, I want another nerve that comes up. Sorry, I meant to use blue here. I know I feel like I click it. Sometimes it just doesn't register on the app I'm using. And this nerve here, this one here, gives 2 branches. One actually goes to the geniohyoid muscle and one to thyrohyoid muscle. And it's very hard to write geniohyoid muscle, so this is the nerve to geniohyoid. I'm going to abbreviate GH. And then thyrohyoid, I'm going to abbreviate TH. These are the nerves to the geniohyoid and the thyrohyoid muscles, and it runs in very close proximity to CN12 here. Now, as well, there will be 1, 2, 3, 4 branches that I want to discuss coming off of the ansa cervicalis. 2 on this side, and then 2 on this side. Now, the first one that I want to discuss is actually going to innervate the superior belly. Number one is going to innervate superior belly of the omohyoid, where number two will actually get the inferior belly of the omohyoid, and then the third one will get the sternothyroid, and the fourth one will get the sternohyoid muscles. And so if you're taking notes, it's a lot easier for me to do this and save space in a drawing when it can get quite busy. Now, a big one that I want to discuss here, very important one, it's going to start off from elements of C3, C4, and C5 nerve roots. To remember this, remember that C3, C4 and C5 keep the diaphragm alive. C3, C4, C5 keep the diaphragm alive, and that is for the phrenic. The phrenic nerve is the nerve that does a lot of the innervation of the diaphragm along with vagal fibers. Now, I did say I wanted to come in and put a couple things here, and I'm going to put a letter A here and a letter B here. Now, letter A, and I'm just going to box him in right here. This is not to be confused with sensory, but letter A here, this represents a nerve that goes to the sternocleidomastoid muscle. So it goes to the sternocleidomastoid. And then B, that is a nerve that actually goes to trapezius and levator scapulae. So we're going to go to part of the trapezius and levator scapulae. As we said, this also goes to some of the shoulder stuff as well. Now, as we start to make note about the motor nerves, we started with C12, cranial nerve number 12, the hypoglossal. And this innervates all the extrinsic tongue muscles except really the paladoglossus. And it's, remember, one of those purely motor nerves. I did a video where I looked at the nerves here. The ansa cervicalis actually has two major branches, a superior that's produced from C1 and an inferior that's produced by C2 and C3 nerve roots. So making ansa cervicalis span nerve roots from C1 and C3 root information, but only spans this little area that we drew out here, the superior part, the inferior part. Now, the descendants hypoglossi, remember, had these different nerves. Number one, the nerve to the superior belly of the omohyoid, and number two, the nerve to the inferior belly of the omohyoid. Remember, these are muscles found in the neck associated to, called strap muscles. And then we had number three was to the sternothyroid, and number four to the sternohyoid muscles. Now, again, C3, C4, and 5 keep the diaphragm alive. Phrenic innervates diaphragm. So as we go to discuss a lot of this, this can help you guys really easily start to get the nerves mapped out. What I recommend to any student who is having to learn these and understand the roots and what goes to what and how these things may function and what may happen when a nerve root is injured is to draw it out like this and map it out. I always urge students to kind of draw with me on these videos, rewatch them and draw them. It really helps. I do have some more anatomical videos I've been wanting to do for some time, but this actually concludes my video on the cervical plexus. I hope you find it useful. I'll have videos on brachial plexus coming out soon as well. But guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you find these helpful and useful. Let me know what you'd like to see me do in future videos. And as always, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. And as always, again, thanks for watching.